You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey y'all, I hope you're having an amazing school year so far. I want to invite you to join me in my free live masterclass where I'll be sharing with you 3 secrets to transform your counseling program, increase your impact, and finally get the recognition you deserve. I promise that you are going to walk away from this training with actionable steps that you can implement right away to immediately make an impact on your students and your counseling program. I'm really excited for this. I really hope you'll join me. We have a few different time options, so you can pick the one that works best for you. Go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/3 secrets. That's the number 3. So that's stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/3 secrets to sign up. Again, it's free, and I hope to see you there. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So today on the podcast, I want to talk to you about your schedule. Now, I don't mean scheduling because I know, especially if you're like a high school counselor, you may do scheduling for students. So I don't want to confuse you here by the title, but I want to talk to you about your schedule, like what you're doing every day as a school counselor. And I want to share with you some strategies for improving your schedule, specifically things you can start doing right now at the beginning of the school year. But first up, you may be thinking, well, what's wrong with my schedule? Why do I even need to improve my schedule? Now, let me read a few statements here and raise your hand to yourself if this is something that you think in your head or if you've said out loud so far this school year. I feel like I'm constantly putting out fires. I don't have any time to create a proactive or preventative school counseling program like I planned. I end up working on nights and during the weekend. If you can relate to any of those things, or if you have thought those thoughts or said those things out loud, you are not alone. This is totally normal. I talk to counselors all the time who feel this way, and it leaves you feeling stressed and overwhelmed, right? And you're already, taking on the burden. This job, you're kind of like a sponge, and sometimes you take on the burden of these, stories that you hear and these things students tell you. It's hard not to empathize. We want to empathize, right? And it's hard not to take it all personally and to really take the burden home with you. That's why we're always talking about self-care and the importance of that. So the job itself can already be kind of heavy, and then you don't want to have to be burdened, stressed, and overwhelmed by your schedule, right? That's just something else stressful, and we are here to eliminate stress, right? Stress-free school counseling is what we're going for. Aside from the stress factor, 2 other reasons you want to streamline your schedule are to increase your impact and advocate for your position so you can get the recognition that you deserve. So what I mean by that is increasing your impact allows you to see more students. So if you're spending less time putting out fires or dealing with non-counseling tasks, then you'll have more time in your schedule to work directly with students, to teach class lessons, to run groups, all of those things. And you can advocate for your position and get that recognition that you deserve, because if you have a more streamlined and organized schedule, you're not going to appear unreliable. You're not going to be overcommitted and having to bail on things last minute or not show up for things that you want to show up for. So the stress, the impact, and the advocating, those are all reasons why you should streamline your schedule. So now you may be on board. You're thinking, yes, I want to improve my schedule. I see the need for it, but how? That's the why. What's the how? So I have 3 simple strategies for you. I hope you can start these today. They're simple and manageable, so let's dive in. First up, schedule in buffers. So what I mean by that is allow a little room for margin in your schedule. Don't schedule every single minute. Now, I'm guilty of this. I will be going to meet friends for dinner or something, and I'll say, okay, it takes 7 minutes to get to the restaurant, and I need 5 more minutes to get ready, whatever. I time it down to the second, and then I always end up being stressed, and honestly, a lot of times a little late. And my husband's always like, why do you cut it so close to the minute? I don't allow any room for error. So yes, it takes 7 minutes to get to the restaurant, but what about, allowing 10 minutes and then you got 3 minutes just in case you're running late, or if, you get in some traffic or something. So it's the same thing when you're doing your counseling lessons and your counseling groups and individual sessions. So individual kiddos, for example, I usually see them for about 20 minutes. But in my calendar, I block off 30 minutes. And the reason I do that is so I have a 10-minute buffer. And you can do 5 minutes beforehand and 5 minutes after. And that buffer time is where you can do things like go to the bathroom. Maybe you need a few minutes in between kiddos to go to the restroom. Maybe it's a little kinder guy and you're going to pick him up from his class. He can't get to your office independently, so you need to account for that travel time walking across campus. Or maybe, your student, I like to call it deep work. Like maybe a student from the previous session, you're in the middle of a really good conversation and they're, confiding something and you don't want to cut them off like, oh, well, I got someone at the door. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I have where students show up to see me and they're like knocking at the door and I'm finishing up with another student and it's, distracting and then the other student feels rushed. It's just not a good look. You want to allow some buffer time. Believe me, you're never going to feel like, oh, I have too much buffer time. And if you do, for some reason, if you, only spend 20 minutes with the kiddo and you got this 10 minutes, you deserve it. Take a little break, a little mini break throughout the day, or use that time to type in your counseling log notes or, catch up on some emails or something like that. Which leads me into my second point here, batching. So speaking of email, a great thing you can do to improve your schedule is batching. So batching is, when I first think of the word batch, before I was thinking of it in or learning about it in a productivity sense, I always think of batching like baking cookies or something, right? I feel like I talk about food a lot on the podcast. Maybe I'm hungry when I record these. But if you're going to, make a batch of cookies, that's exactly what you do. You make a batch. You make like 12 or 24. You don't make one cookie because it kind of takes a lot of time to make the cookies. So you might as well make a bunch of them and then you can enjoy them for a while. So same thing with anything you do. If you batch things, then you're able to be more productive because you're kind of focused on that task already and have all the materials you need for that task. So it's easier than, coming back to it, because I don't know the exact number or science, but there's some science behind how long it takes our brain to redirect to a new task. So if you're doing something and then you switch tasks, it takes a few seconds for your brain to get registered and to get ready for that task. So while you're deep into a task, you might as well pump it to its full capacity. So what I mean by that in terms of email is you can batch your email. So if you have your inbox open all day, you're in and out of there. It's honestly very distracting. It's annoying. You see things you don't want to see. Maybe you're seeing emails that you didn't want to read right then. It's kind of like when a text comes in on your phone too. Honestly, it can affect your mood. Like you kind of glance down and you're like, oh, like maybe you're getting some negative feedback from a parent or something. It's distracting. Batching your email is when you set time in your calendar. I recommend doing this at the beginning of the day for sure, and then at the end of the day for closure. If you want, you can throw some in the middle of the day too, but set aside a time chunk on your calendar to batch your email. You sit down, respond to any emails you need to respond to, send any emails you need to send to, then you exit out of that email tab. Later in the day, you'll check it again and you'll have new ones to respond to. So yeah, there's a few hours where, your response time is going to be a little slower, and you do want to be mindful of that and tell people, like, you can expect to hear from me within X amount of time, because we really want to, set clear boundaries and expectations. That way everyone knows, disappointment is fueled by unmet expectations. So you want to make sure that you're being really clear on when and how people can contact you and when they can expect a response time. But once you establish those things, this is a game changer for you. This is so much better than having that inbox open all day long. And if you're like me, I remember when I was at the public school, I was on so many different email lists. I was on like the specialist list and the counselor list and then the elementary school list and like the district-wide list. So anytime these emails got sent out, a lot of times they didn't even pertain to me directly, but they were very distracting and very time consuming. So I totally recommend batching. Third up, so we've talked about scheduling and buffers. We've talked about batching email. The third thing, the tool that I think you should do to improve your schedule is to schedule in a planning period. Whoop, rewind. Schedule in a planning period. Yes, teachers do it. You should too. You totally deserve a planning period. How are you supposed to plan class lessons and small groups and individual activities and character events and parent workshops and all of these awesome things you do? How are you supposed to do that without a planning period? you should not be working in the evenings or on weekends or outside of your contracted hours, right? You need that time for self-care, to recharge, to hang with your family and friends, to do whatever you want to do. That is not when you should be planning. So you need a planning period. I mean, you can determine how often you need this. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a day. But I think this is super important to prep for everything. Now, if for some reason you're all planned up and you don't need your time, which I doubt it, I feel like there's always something to plan and prep. But if for some reason you're all caught up, then you can, check your email even if it's outside of your batch time. Or you can do some student observations or take a little break or something like that, right? So we set these things into our schedule to make our lives easier. And then if we happen to not need these buffers and batch periods and planning periods, then we can use that time for something else. But I guarantee you're going to use them and they're going to make your life a little bit easier. I sure hope so. So I want you to try these. If you try one out, tag me or send me a message at Bright Futures Counseling on Instagram because I would love to hear if it's working for you. I encourage you to try to pick one of these to try today or tomorrow if you're listening to this in the evening. Now you may be thinking, okay, Rachel, I see the need for a schedule overhaul. I am on board. Let's do this. But I do have an objection. I don't have time in my schedule to revamp my schedule. I don't know how many times I've heard that. They're like, yeah, the great tip, but I don't have time for this. Let me tell you a little secret. You don't have time not to do this. If you listened to my organization episode last week, I was kind of talking about a similar thing about how getting organized takes a little initial investment in your time in the get-go, but it saves you so much time later on, over and over again. And you're constantly getting rewarded for the little effort you did in the beginning. That's what I'm telling you now. It's the beginning of the school year. Now's the time to revamp your schedule, put these systems into place, and they will pay for themselves tenfold. Later down the road, you're going to feel way less stressed. You're going to see more kids than ever before, and you're going to be able to advocate for your role using the schedule. So I hope you find this helpful. If you want to learn more of these secrets and more of my scheduling secrets, you have to check out my free live masterclass tonight. I'm going to be sharing with you 3 secrets to transform your counseling program so you can increase your impact and finally get the recognition that you deserve. I promise that you will walk away from this masterclass with actionable steps that you can immediately use to make an impact on your students and your counseling program. So sign up. I hope you join me tonight. It's live. It's free. It's going to be awesome. StressFreeSchoolCounseling.com/3secrets. That's the number 3. So StressFreeSchoolCounseling.com/3secrets. Or I'll put a link in the show notes for you. And if you didn't catch that, if you're driving or something, don't worry about writing it down. Send me a DM at Bright Futures Counseling when you're parked. And I will get the link over to you and help you get signed up. Okay, guys, I can't wait. I hope I get to talk to you tonight. And if you can't make it tonight, we have a few other times. So please sign up, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.